3 days ago, I dumped 2 tablespoons of broccoli seeds into a mason jar on my kitchen counter, and this morning I pulled out nearly a full pound of living, crunchy microgreens that cost me about 40 cents to produce. No soil, no grow lights, no sunny windowsill, no fancy trays from some gardening store trying to sell you a $90 starter kit. Now compare that to what most folks do. They drive to the grocery store, pay $7 or $8 for a little plastic clamshell of sprouts or microgreens that are already 3 days past their prime, and they do it over and over again every single week. That's a few $100s a year for something you can grow on your counter faster than you can drive to the store. Here's where it clicked for me. I was reading up on research out of Johns Hopkins about broccoli sprouts, and it turns out a 3-day-old sprout can contain dozens of times more of certain compounds than a full-grown head of broccoli. 3 days on a counter. In suck the dark. That got my attention real quick. Today I'm going to walk you through exactly how I grow a pound of fresh microgreen sprouts in 72 hours using nothing but a jar, some water, and a handful of seeds. And stay with me to the end because there's a little trick I learned from an old market grower that turns plain white sprouts into something loaded with way more of that good-for-you green chlorophyll. And it only takes about 4 extra hours. Now let me be straight with you. I did this the wrong way for a long time. My dad grew sprouts in the kitchen back in the 70s when it was trendy, and I remembered him doing it. So when I finally tried it myself, I overcomplicated the heck out of it. I bought the plastic stackable trays, I bought the humidity domes, I tried using potting soil in shallow trays and ended up with mold every single time. Wasted money, wasted seed, and wasted 2 weekends scrubbing fuzzy green gunk off my counter. If you've been looking at those fancy microgreen setups online and thinking you need $150 worth of gear to get started, you're not alone. I was right there with you. Then I went back to basics, pulled out a mason jar like my dad used, and everything changed. Simpler, cleaner, faster, and cheaper. Here's the thing nobody tells you clearly. A seed already contains everything it needs to sprout. Every drop of stored energy, every nutrient, every bit of material to push out a root, and a shoot is packed inside that little shell. And all you're doing when you sprout seeds is adding water and letting the seed wake up. You're not growing a plant yet. You're just hatching it. That's why soil doesn't matter. That's why sunlight doesn't matter for the first 3 or 4 days. Research out of the University of Maryland confirmed what old-timers already knew. A seed in the dark with enough moisture and enough airflow will outperform a seed stuck in wet dirt 9 times out of 10 because there's no mold, no fungus, no pests, and no nutrient competition. Once you understand that, the whole thing gets simple. All right, let's get to it. The first thing you need is the right seed. I use broccoli seed most of the time. But radish, alfalfa, clover, and mung bean all work the same way on the same schedule. What you're looking for on the label is 3 words: untreated, food grade, and intended for sprouting. Do not, and I mean do not, use seed packets meant for the garden. Those are often treated with fungicides that you absolutely do not want to eat. I buy mine in 1-pound bags from a sprouting seed supplier. A pound runs me about $15 and lasts me the better part of a year. For the jar, you want a wide-mouth quart mason jar. That's the standard size jar you've probably got in your cupboard already. The wide mouth part matters because you need airflow across the surface. Then you need a sprouting lid. This is the one thing you might have to buy. A simple stainless steel mesh sprouting lid runs about $3. You can also use a square of cheesecloth held on with the jar's metal ring. Either one works. No need to get fancy. Now here's where the growing begins. Take 2 tablespoons of broccoli seed and pour them into the jar. That's it. 2 level tablespoons. I know it looks like almost nothing, but those seeds are going to expand 10 to 15 times their starting volume by the time you're done. If you load that jar up with half a cup thinking you're going to get a bigger harvest, you're going to end up with a jammed up, moldy mess by day 2. Trust me on that one. I've made that mistake at least 3 times. Fill the jar about 2/3 with cool tap water. Not hot, not ice cold. Just comfortable room temperature water. Screw on your sprouting lid, give it a little swirl to make sure all the seeds are wet, and set it on the counter somewhere out of direct sunlight. A cupboard works great. So does a corner of the counter under a cabinet. You're going to let those seeds soak for 8 to 12 hours. I usually do this right before bed and deal with it in the morning. The reason this soaking step matters comes down to basic seed biology. That hard outer seed coat needs to fully hydrate before the embryo inside wakes up. Skip the soak, and your germination rate drops by half. Soak too long, over 18 hours, and the seeds actually start to suffocate and rot because they have used up all the oxygen dissolved in the water. The next morning, with the sprouting lid still on, flip the jar upside down over the sink and drain all that water out. Then run fresh, cool water into the jar right through the mesh, swirl it around, and drain again. This is your first rinse. Your seeds are now fully plumped up and ready to go to work. Here's the key move that makes this whole system bulletproof. Prop that jar upside down at about a 45-degree angle in a bowl or a dish rack. You want the mesh lid pointing down so any extra water can drip out, but you also want some airflow so the seeds don't sit in a wet puddle. Wet seeds at the bottom of a flat jar is how you get mold. Angled seeds with airflow is how you get a perfect crop. Before we go any further, if this kind of straight to the point gardening is your thing, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. I put out practical, no fluff videos every week for folks who'd rather grow food than read a bunch of marketing hype about it. All right, let's keep going. Now you just rinse and drain that jar every morning and every evening for the next 2 to 3 days. That's the whole routine. Takes about 30 seconds each time. Fill with water, swirl gently, drain. Prop it back at an angle. If you forget a rinse and go 12 hours without one, they'll survive. But don't make a habit of it. Dry sprouts get bitter, and wet sprouts get moldy. Twice a day, every day is the sweet spot. By the end of day 1, you'll see little white tails emerging from each seed. That's the root, the first thing to break out. By the middle of day 2, those tails are a 1/4 inch long, and the whole jar looks like a little white forest. By the end of day 3, you'll have a jar absolutely packed full of sprouts with tiny yellow leaves just starting to form. That yellow color throws a lot of first-timers off, but don't worry. Those leaves are yellow because they haven't seen any light yet. They're perfectly healthy. Now here's where most folks stop and pull the jar out. And you can absolutely eat them right now. They're tender, they're crunchy, and the nutrition is already in there. But if you want to take these from good to great, we're about to do one more step. Take your jar of sprouts, give it one final rinse with cool water, and set it in a spot that gets indirect natural light for about 4 to 6 hours. Not direct sun through a south-facing window. That will cook them. You want filtered light, maybe on the kitchen counter away from the window, or in a room with a bright north-facing window. In those few hours, every one of those yellow leaves is going to turn a vibrant, bright green as chlorophyll production kicks in. This is the part I promised you at the beginning. That old market grower I mentioned told me this trick almost 30 years ago, and I'd forgotten it until I started sprouting again. 4 hours of indirect light after 3 days of darkness gives you green sprouts, with noticeably more chlorophyll and, according to that Johns Hopkins research, higher levels of that sulforaphane compound broccoli sprouts are famous for. Don't do it for a day, don't do it overnight. 4 to 6 hours is the window. Then pull them, give them one last rinse, and move them to storage. To store them, dump the sprouts out of the jar onto a clean kitchen towel and gently pat them dry. Surface moisture is the enemy of shelf life. Then put them in a glass container with a loose lid or in a paper bag folded over and tuck them in the crisper drawer of your fridge. Stored right, they'll stay crisp for 7 to 10 days. Mine rarely last that long because I'm eating them on everything from eggs to sandwiches to salads. Before we wrap up, let me hit the 4 mistakes I see folks make with this method. Because if you're going to stumble, it'll be on one of these. The first pattern is overcrowding the jar. I already mentioned it, but it's worth repeating. 2 tablespoons of small seed per quart jar. Mung beans are bigger, so you can do 3 tablespoons. If you pack it tight, you get rot. Less is more here. Second, using the wrong water. If you're on heavy city chlorine water, fill your jar the night before and let it sit on the counter uncovered for a few hours. The chlorine will gas off. Chlorinated water can slow down germination and mess with your rinse rhythm. I learned this one the hard way about 15 years ago when I moved to a new town with aggressive water treatment. Third, direct sunlight during the growing phase. Folks see plant and think sun, not here. Your sprouts need darkness for those first 3 days or they'll get tough, stringy, and bitter. Save the light for the last few hours. Fourth, inconsistent rinsing. Skipping a rinse because you were busy, then double rinsing to make up for it. Doesn't work that way. Twice a day, roughly 12 hours apart, like clockwork. Set a reminder on your phone if you need to. It's the single biggest factor in whether your jar produces gold or goes in the trash, so there it is. A mason jar, 2 tablespoons of seed, tap water, and 3 days of your attention. About 30 seconds of work morning and night. Less than $1 a jar. No soil to deal with. No grow lights to plug in. No sunny window required. And by the end of the week, you've got fresh living greens on your counter that would cost you $7 at the grocery store. If you try this, come back and let me know how it turned out in the comments. I'd love to hear which seeds you went with and how your first jar came out. And if you've got an old timer trick of your own for sprouting, share it down there too. We all learn from each other. Good luck and keep growing.